and secret wisdom will remain on this land, because the people will use the force of Midgard Earth elements and destroy the small moon together with their beautiful world. And the circle of Svarog will then turn, and the human souls will be horrified. The line, only priest keepers of the ancient knowledge and secret wisdom will remain on this land. This could well be describing what is known as the elders, explained in the Shane the Runa shows, who have lived for thousands of years, and I mean thousands of years. They were here at that time. They were here at the time when the Draco arrived. They told us not to sign that agreement. Some of those elders, as I understand, are 350,000 years old. Now, there was 11 back in 2014. There's now 9. As the frequencies increased, they were unable to handle the vibration. They'd been here stagnant for too long. We were trying to get, well, I asked directly, but Shane was in contact with the elders, at least one of them anyway. And I tried to arrange a meeting back in 2014 to see if we could convince the elders to step forward and help. That was kind of refused, as they'd refused to step forward and help for the last 16,500 years. Basically stating, well, you made your bed, so lie in it, because we went against their wisdom with the Draco. Not long after that, 2 of them committed suicide. I thought you should take note. These elders are in no way related to the fake clown Chinese elders on the hashtag Operation Stupidity called the RV. So only the higher caste of the priest keepers were able to avoid the danger of the dark forces' influence at that time, because they would have already passed the interplanetary cycle of evolutionary development and therefore become immune to it. That's what happens when you transition and go into a different phase of higher development. You become immune to the dark. Certainly in the manner that they have portrayed here anyway. All the others who failed in completing this evolutionary stage of their development would be unable to withstand the virus, is what it says in the text. Interesting terminology, is it not? Of course, we mentioned back in the Tanath Sunfire shows about the fractal virus that permeated itself through 80% of this universe. Maybe that's what they're referring to, the dark fractal virus. I want to bring your attention, which will take us nicely into the next music break. As stated earlier, it is clear that this planet was in part used as a safe house for refugees fleeing war and destruction on their home worlds. And this is why I get rather pissy with people saying, we don't want refugees in our country. It's just wrong on so many levels. And the question is, what if most of the souls who resided here currently are all refugees? Does that change your opinion? For those who won't welcome refugees in their time of need, perhaps they need to think and act differently with the new knowledge available. Hi all and welcome back. The next portion of this is called the War of Atlantis, not Atlantis. The described events reflecting the consequences of the armed conflict between the ancient Slavonic Aryan Empire and the Antlian, known as Atlantis, its province which had separated from it, and this happened 13,027 years ago, exactly. The war for world domination resulted in the planetary catastrophe when the small moon Theta was destroyed and the fragments fell down on Midgard Earth, causing tremendous natural cataclysms. And this is when the axis of Midgard Earth changed its angle to 23.5 degrees. 13,027 years ago. The continental plates began to move, causing powerful earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. The clouds of volcanic ash thrown into the higher layers of the atmosphere hid what they called the Yarilo, Y-A-R-I-L-O, sun. I'll have more on that later. Twilight set in for a long time, and vast areas of dry land sank into the ocean abyss while the others emerged from it. The waters of the Atlantic Ocean hid in its depths the rebellious Antlians forever. So this is two separate wars where the two moons that were close to us, one was 7 days in orbit, a 7-day orbit, which is a quarter of the distance to the current moon, and the other was 13 days. This is Theta, what was 13 days, which is half the distance between us and the current moon. New mountain ranges rose at once. Giant tsunamis turned around Midgard Earth several times, and the term that they mentioned earlier, and the circle of Svarog, will turn then. The climate was dramatically changed, and all this cast Midgard Earth civilization from the intergalactic level to the level of almost complete savagery, with the rare islands of civilization which the priest keepers managed to preserve. Perrin spoke to the peoples and warned them precisely about these events in the next passage. The great night will wrap Midgard Earth, and the celestial fire will destroy many lands of earth. Vast deserts will be there, where wonderful gardens flowered. Seas will be rolling on where life-giving dry land was, and high mountains covered by eternal snows will appear where seas, waves washed. Like I said, this all took place 13,027 years ago, which was around 3,000 years after the Draco arrived here, stating they were coming here to save us, whilst all the time plotting with the dark forces to gain maximum advantage. Now, the keeper of the ways, known as the elders, did advise humanity, as I said earlier, to not align with the Draco, and all that advice was ignored, and the elders sat back and watched us fail. So it should be noted for the listeners, those at the top end of the game, I mentioned about 2 of the elders committing suicide. At the very top end of the game, there appears to be a no-kill policy. But they make efforts of the dark to try to get people into a state whereby they end up taking their own lives. Now, suicide has a devastating karmic effect on the individual in the next life, as they drop down a scale of personal evolution. Now, during the war between the ancient Slavonic Aryan Empire and the Antlans, nuclear weapons and the psi-influenced forces of nature were applied, and the conditions here were described clearly. People will hide in caves from the poisoned, death-burning rains, acid rain, and will eat the flesh of animals because the fruits will be filled with poisons, and having eaten them, many people will die. The poisoned streams of water will bring death to the children of the great race and descendants of the celestial clan, and thirst will make people suffer. So this war reduced Midgard's Earth civilization from a level of a colony of the enormous union of light forces civilizations down to a primitive level of what essentially was savagery. In times of full strife, the lessons learned, it seems, can return to us in an instant, or lessons not learned. Back to the primitive, everyone for themselves mode, and subsequently have and have-nots aligned with divide and conquer. Same thing over and over again. So the reason for the issues with the Antlans on this horrible situation was the spiritual immaturity of the Antlans' higher caste. Same problem over again. The higher caste here, the bloodline families, are all psychopaths, and they're dictating. It's the same when there is cosmic meetings. Every species sends idiotic war warriors, all dick swinging, male or female. How about we send the people with reasoning? Do you think America would be at war in Syria if it was really up to the people? Do you think we'd be in Afghanistan? Do you think we'd be threatening North Korea? Absolutely not. All these wars that have gone on for millennia are all because of spiritual immaturity is at the higher caste of each species, not just human. The Draco higher caste are beyond stupidity. They haven't even learnt about themselves. That's why many of these races of the dark forces in some ways are trying to help us so then they can piggyback on our personal evolution. Otherwise, they would have wiped us out a long time ago. When we didn't have some of the weaponry we've got out now. but the representatives of the Atlantans were beyond measure carried away by technology, forgetting about the spiritual aspect of development, possessing knowledge sufficient to create high technologies. They, nevertheless, remained spiritually immature. This is why I keep warning about the dangers of technology. It creates convenience and laziness, idle minds. You want to check the weather? Go outside. Not ask the stupid election machine that's recording all your information. The conditions for inharmonious development had originated in the midst of this civilization that were created by the migrants, natives of one of the Slavonic Aryan tribes, the Ants, Mantids. And of course, in the course of time, led to the desire to dominate the whole world. You want to know why I call them bug-eyed bastards? There you go. These distorted souls became a nutrient medium for the Dark Forces virus and created an environment which allowed the Dark Forces' secret emissaries to penetrate into our planet. Star parasites succeeded in penetrating our Midgard Earth, and from this moment, the nuclear catastrophe which happened 13,000 years ago became inevitable. We're coming up to that 13,000 year cycle again. Now you know why everything's ramped up. 13,000, 26,000, 13,000, 26,000, loop, 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 loop. This time, no loop. Oh, this virus, as I said earlier, could well be related to the fractal virus described in greater detail by Sunfire and Tanath. Now, the secret preparation of the representative of Antlan's ruling caste, infected with this virus, for taking the power on the planet by force, which resulted in the nuclear war, which in its turn resulted in a catastrophe which eliminated the majority of those who were affected by the dark virus. Like always, small groups of the hierarchs of the Antlan managed to board Vitmanas and Vitmaras at the moment of the catastrophe, survived and became those dark force seeds which fruit we harvest even now. This is what the Cabal and the dark forces were planning with CERN. They were going to blow the whole thing again and escape via a created gateway via CERN and the central sun. Unfortunately for them, we have people with abilities on this planet that shut it down in August of 2015. They had to complete it by December 2016. It failed. Following the advice of strangers who secretly arrived on Midgard Earth, people will start to take the life of each other for the sake of a sip of fresh water and a piece of clean food. That's why it said we are reduced to savagery, and they will forget the ancient wisdom and the laws of the God Creator. The great disunion will come to the world of Midgard, and only priest keepers of the sacred land of the great race will keep the purity of the ancient knowledge, despite all ordeals, privations, and death. So the Earth inhabitants of our planet had now become infected by the Dark Forces virus. Midgard Earth was isolated from other Earth planets of the Light Forces, and the gates between worlds, the Stargates on our Midgard Earth, were disconnected from the transport system of Light Forces civilizations to prevent the virus penetrating other planets.